was Colin Gow, great friend of the podcast, and UA business person, owner of Colin's Coffee, with our theme song podcast. We are back.
Happy New Year.
2023.
I'm going to mess up dates for at least the first month, when you have to date your paperwork.
I know. It's a very troubling thing. But we are going to kick off the year in fairly grand style.
I would say so.
I think we're going to raise the bar of our discussion today.
Don't oversell this.
It's going to be much more intellectual than our normal
to a much higher level.
I can guarantee you that. I even have notes.
Ooh.
We are here today with a great member of the community, great fan and friend of the show, the source of the, what color would you call these?
Teal? Would you say
Yeah,
teal?
I'd go with teal.
Aquamarine?
These are like the alternate jerseys for us.
It's like the Color Rush jerseys on NFL Thursday night.
Yeah, it's Color Rush jerseys, or like the city version for the NBA. Yeah, with the alternate version sweaters, because these were a very kind gift to the show by none other than the pastor of St. Mark's Episcopal, Pastor Vicki Zust. Pastor Vicki, welcome.
Thank you. This is fun.
Well, we haven't really got into it.
Well, I'm a little worried when the lawyer says he has notes.
Oh, they're good notes.
So you know how this works because you've listened, as you said, you've listened to, if not almost every
show.
Every show.
She's right up in there in the superfan categories. I'm not ready to knock my dad off his perch as the superfan.
No, that's a
no, that would be bad. There's a commandment about that.
Yeah, but you could be number, like the 11th or something. Don't knock your dad off superfan status.
So, we start with Start Bench Cut, and when you agreed to be on the podcast, I was sitting and thinking about it, and I was sitting in church one morning, and this is a true story.
Okay.
Some of this is true. The first part of it is where it came to me is true. As I was sitting in church over at First Community North, and Glenn Miles was speaking, and suddenly it started. I started to get this feeling that reminded me. Have you seen the Blues Brothers?
Oh yeah.
The scene where James Brown is going, and Jake and Elwood are in the back of the church, and everybody's singing and dancing, and the heavens open, and Jake gets the inspiration that the band. It's the band. Well, I had the inspiration for a Start Bench Cut for you.
This is kind of behind the scenes because it was one of those we should not do that.
We should not do this. But
this is where the lawyer might have helped you out or helped us both out.
So I'm going to offer it, but I don't think we're going to have you answer it because A, I think it's too hard, and B, it does violate one of our rules that we violated when it was Darren's dad, but it involved Darren's dad because we have a rule against kind of choosing against family, and this is somewhat related to that. And, of course, the podcast Start Bench Cut for you really would have to be Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
I can't believe I didn't anticipate that.
Yeah, I mean, it was so obviously bad.
Yes.
I know, but we're not going to make you go with that one. So the one we are going to go with, you sent us your bio, and you indicated you spent 12 years in Buffalo.
Yeah.
And we are doing this first week of January, so we are coming off of the really scary incident Monday night where our Bengals were ahead of the Bills, and there was a tragic accident.
Had to slip that in there, dude. They called it a 0 game.
I did slip that in.
I mean, honestly,
they were ahead.
They were ahead.
But we do want to bring it to a little bit of a fun thing about the Bills and try and bring it back around to what football should be and is, which is something fun. We're going to give you a Start Bench Cut with Bills greats.
Okay, so we're going to start now because Josh Allen is the guy, so he's on the list. And then you got to go Jim Kelly because he's probably the other quarterback. And then we kind of struggled between O.J. Simpson and Thurman Thomas. So I think going on this theory of good people, we probably should go
Thurman Thomas.
Yeah.
But I wanted you again to know the behind the scenes that OJ was listed, because on stats, he actually was a really good player.
He was a really good player, but that
Such a
would have
good
been
guy.
a little easy to,
Yeah, we know who's getting.
especially this week.
Yes, so you can have Thurman Thomas as your third.
As my third. So let's see. Well, I got to start Josh Allen. I mean, especially after yesterday's press conference, which I have to say, I had the press conference with Sean McDermott and Josh Allen on listening to while I was watching C-SPAN for the speakers race.
Yeah, it's like a double
muted.
thing going on.
And I was kind of thinking, could we just get Sean Allen to be the speaker? No, probably not. Sean McDermott to be speaker of the House? No, probably not. But so I got to go with Josh to start. I'll bench Jim Kelly, which means I can never go back to Buffalo to visit friends again. But
I think they like Josh Allen.
they do like Josh Allen too. And then I'll cut Thurman Thomas, which again means I can't ever go back to Buffalo again. But
So
that's how
now
it goes.
Who would you say is more beloved by the Buffalo people, Jim Kelly or Thurman? Because they played at the same time.
They played at the same time. I think Jim Kelly only because he still lives in the community and is still really active in the community. And Thurman Thomas is beloved, but he visits. He's not a Western New Yorker.
And I assume those are both harder than Kenny Lofton. That was my other legitimate pick. Because he also is you have a lot of Hall of Famers.
A lot of Hall of Famers.
Bruce Smith, what about, is he better than those guys?
That's hard to say.
I went offense, but they had a lot of Hall of Famers on
a
that
lot
team.
of Hall of Famers. So you didn't do Steve Traska, which would have been the other really tough one.
I kind of gravitate towards him because he's kind of more of a scrappy type player. But I thought that might be too easy for you. Maybe not.
Maybe not, because he's contributed to the community and the organization again, since he stopped playing, which is another piece of that, right?
This is a great question because we didn't make it too difficult so she doesn't hate us, but we actually got more insight into how you rank them. So it's more than just their playing years and their stats.
Well, that's Western New York, though. I mean, Buffalo calls itself the city of good neighbors, and so a piece of it is, how do you interact beyond your job? And that's because you get, you have weeks where you get 7 feet of snow in 24 hours. And there isn't no city that can help with that.
Right.
You all have to help each other.
So how did you go from, you grew up in Westerville.
Grew up in Westerville.
Attended school here.
Mm-hmm.
How'd you end up in Buffalo?
How'd I end up in Buffalo? The way the Episcopal Church works is that clergy can apply for positions anywhere in the country. So once you're an Episcopal priest, you're an Episcopal priest, and you can apply for any open job. From seminary, I spent a year in Bexley as the assistant, and then I was rector, which is pastor, senior person at the church in Newark, Ohio. And from there, I got called to be on the bishop's staff in Cincinnati. This is a great object lesson. Never be in your office the day after Christmas and never answer your phone. Because that's what happened. I answered the phone and it was my bishop, and he said, "At your ordination, you promised you'd obey me." And I thought, oh crap, this isn't going to end well.
That's not a good way to start the conversation.
This is not going to end, whatever this is not going to end well. And what he said is, "I'm calling you to my staff." So I moved to Cincinnati and was on the bishop's staff for 5 years.
I wonder if we can change what we have people say when they sign on to
You
work
know,
for the
you
city.
should go with the,
Promise to obey me?
will you obey the city manager and all others who may have authority over you and your work?
I like it. I'll write it up.
Can you write that up for me?
Can you imagine somebody if they were actually coming to start like, hey, one more thing you got to sign before we get you enrolled. You got your new hire paperwork, your I-9, and this.
Oh, you don't even have to. I mean, more than sign it. I had to sign it too, but you have to make the promise before God and everybody.
And everybody. I don't know which one's the worst. God, that's pretty big. But then everybody else too.
Yeah.
Well, we can't do that because I'm a big separation church and state person,
yeah,
so that just throws it all out. So the whole thing just falls apart then.
And everyone, collective breath of the city. Thank goodness.
Collective breath, collective eye roll. Which one of the two?
One of the two. But anyway, so I was on the bishop's staff in Cincinnati, and we got a new bishop, and I helped the new bishop transition in, and then wanted to get back into parish ministry, and the church in Buffalo was a great fit for me, and so I put my name in, and they called me, and I went there for 12 years, and I wasn't actually thinking about leaving, and somebody sent me the St. Mark's profile and said, "They're looking for you. You need to read this." And
which is slightly nicer than you promised to do whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So I read it, and I thought, this sounds like fun. So I put my name in thinking, oh, they won't call me. They'll have a lot of candidates. And they called me. So I don't know if they're sorry yet. They will be soon. But they.
So this is like a really dumb question, but when you like put in for one of these things, I mean, what do? You don't have a resume or something?
Oh,
right?
yeah. I have a regular resume, and then the Episcopal Church has what we facetiously call the Episcopal computer dating service. It's this computer that lives in our national offices in New York, and every priest has a profile, and every parish that's looking for a priest has a profile, and when you apply, you have to send your profile, and the parish can send their profile in and spit out lists of matches. It is effectively the Episcopal computer dating service.
That's cool.
So is there somebody in a collar swiping left or swiping right?
Well, no, it's the Episcopal Church, so our tech isn't that good.
It's probably on one of those old screens with like the green right.
Yeah, I think it might still be based on the big floppy disks.
Yeah.
That you
prints out on a dot matrix printer.
Exactly.
With the holes on the side. Yeah.
Those holes were great, man. You remember that?
Oh yeah, you had to pull them
off.
We're totally dating ourselves right now.
Floating around the house. And
yeah.
Do you remembe those holes?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Nostalgia break. Okay. So as a minister of a church here in Upper Arlington, well, first of all, tell us a little bit about St. Mark's for people who might not know where it is, like Darren, who doesn't know where anything is yet in Upper Arlington. Where is it? How many parishioners do you have?
A lot of people don't know where St. Mark's is. When I tell them, they're confused. We are on Dorset Road, and our campus runs across. Basically, we're directly across from the Tremont Center. So we run between Tremont and Reading. So we're across from the library, across from Northern Park.
I do know where they are, Steve. I go there all the time.
Found one place
that's one place I know. Yeah.
So that's where we are. But the front of the church, the Tremont Avenue side, doesn't scream church. The big name is on the Dorset Road side. So if you don't drive down Dorset, it's like, what's that weird looking building over there?
I actually have had that reaction, but now I know because I have turned on that street and said, "Oh, this is part of this." Okay.
Yeah. So St. Mark's we've got. Numbers are tricky with churches because people say they're members and then people are members who don't say they're members. But we've got somewhere in the neighborhood of 350 to 400 people who feel like they're connected to St. Mark's. We see between 100 and 150 on any given Sunday, depending on what time of year it is, what the weather's doing, and another 60 to 100 devices who watch our live stream. So that's roughly 120 to...
Did you start doing that during COVID, or were you kind of doing that already?
No, they started doing that during COVID, and shout out to the AV team. We have a fantastic AV team who are all volunteers. I would put our live stream up against any church's live stream. They have lots of cameras and lots of camera angles, and I can do that because it has nothing to do with me. It was all in place before I got here. So,
do you think that's been I'd be interested in your thoughts on, has that been a great outreach tool, or is it kind of taken away from getting people, together?
No, it's actually been huge. We have, of all of the people who have joined the church since I've been there, all of them said that they watched the live stream several times before they actually walked in the door. So people have had a chance to check us out and see what we're like and before coming and joining us, which also means that they start knowing a little bit.
Yeah.
So, which is great for, when you walk in the door and you see people you recognize, it makes you feel a lot more comfortable. And then the other thing is, the weather Christmas was not great, but I got to give you guys a shout out because the streets in UA were a hell of a lot better than the streets anywhere else Christmas Eve, and I should know because I had people coming from. I had to make the decision about whether we were actually going to have church.
What is your general radius of your members?
We've got most of our people are UA or Hilliard or the parts of Columbus that are right close adjacent. We do have a few who come from Grove City. We have a few from Galloway. We have a few from as far north as Powell, which is surprising. But there is not another Episcopal church southwest of us until you get to London. Oh, wow. So we're beginning to pick up all that housing that's being built out in that area.
Looking through your bio, there were
I was going to say, Steve, you can ask one real question, but we got to dig into something.
No, we do got to dig in. So you say that one of your areas of study has been the English Reformation. So is there a movie that is there's like tons and tons of movies that are all somehow basically they use the conflict between the Catholics and the Protestants in England to make a great movie. The first one that comes to mind is Braveheart.
Yes.
So
and we tried to think of other ones, but we couldn't.
Run me down your list.
My list? My favorite is Elizabeth, the one with, oh my God, I just blanked on her name. Elizabeth, and then there's a sequel, Elizabeth the Golden Age. I like that. I like the Elizabeth one because it does a really good job of setting the scene, but also Elizabeth I is just such an amazing woman. And it's really during her reign that Anglican theology became something other than, well, we're not Catholic, so what are we? And so it's under Elizabeth that really happened. So I like that one. Anne of 1,000 Days is one of my favorites. That's old.
You haven't seen that one.
That's an older one, but it's really cool. I like Braveheart, although it's a little more about Scotland.
Yeah.
Mary Queen of Scots is another one that gets at it, and that one's been done a couple of times with a couple of people in the lead.
I did a book report on Mary Queen of Scots like in 6th grade or something.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of a sad story.
It is a sad story.
Like, I don't know why they let me do a report on that when I was a kid. It was kind of depressing.
There's a little bit of sex and violence in that story.
Yeah, it was like, I don't know why they let me research that.
But here's the real question. How does that all relate to Harry and Meghan and William? I mean, bring it all back. Bring it to the present day, and tell me how this relates to the story that I saw you about William coming at.
Coming at Harry. Well, the way the Episcopal Church directly connects to Harry and Meghan is Michael Curry, who is the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church, was the preacher at Harry and Meghan's wedding.
I was not completely out of left field on this question.
Your question was completely random, but it actually ties in.
That actually
saved by the strength of the guest, not your question. Just to point that out there.
The Episcopal Church is part of the Anglican Communion that the Church of England is a part of too.
Got it.
So when Meghan, being an American, when she was getting married in the Church of England, the representative of her church was our presiding bishop. And
so now it's the Episcopal Church in the U.S. and the Church of England. Are you guys going at it, fighting one side's for Harry?
We should think about that.
Meghan and one side's for William.
We should think about that, especially now that we have an American princess. I don't know. We'll have to think about that.
I think that might be the new schism.
I love how you're trying to start conflict now, too.
We could work on that,
It all started on a podcast in America.
That's
in
right.
Ohio. Yeah. They were getting along great until Steve suggested a rivalry.
That they needed to bring in their different versions of the church.
Well, part of the problem is that we're really closely connected also with the Anglican Church of Canada. So I don't know, if we schism with the Church of England, would we have to schism with Canada? Then all of a sudden we've got the beginnings of a world war.
Canada doesn't schism with anybody.
Canada loves everybody. They would sit it out. So what would be like the official definition in this realm of a schism? Like, Steve and I have a schism every episode. Like, what would we have to do to create a real schism?
To create a real schism, you have to find something to fight about that is what we call a salvation issue. And not, I'm going to use a very scary word now that the Lutherans use more than we do, but we'll use it, that is not adiaphora.
Boom, that's a great word. I have no idea what it means.
I think I met her at a conference one time.
Look, we can't schism over adiaphora. She's a nice lady.
Yeah, she's a nice woman. Adiaphora means not important.
So it has
basically.
To not be.
So you have to find something important, not something that
trivial,
not something trivial, or not something that's not going to keep people out of heaven. Right?
And when there's a potential schism coming down the road, do you have a mediation? Like, hey, maybe we can work through this first, or is it just like we're done?
Oh no, schisms take a long time. The first schism, the one that's called the Great Schism between the Western Church, which became the Roman Catholic Church and then all the Protestant churches, and the Eastern Church, which became all the churches that have the word Orthodox in their name, so the Greek Orthodox, Western Orthodox. That happened, it finally happened around the year 1000, but it was brewing for about 800 years.
So we're not going to be able to start our own schism and live to see it, Steve. It's not gonna, sorry, man.
I mean, with the internet and social media, it can.
The Protestant Reformation went faster because of the printing press, but that was about 300 years. So, I don't know what
we need like a 20-minute schism. I don't have an attention span more than that. Is that possible?
I don't know if the internet will move it up that fast.
Yeah, it's probably for the best.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's taken 3 days at this point to pick a House Speaker.
Well, I was kind of really not paying attention to the later votes. Did either of you guys get any votes?
I mean, the
number of people who were getting votes.
Wouldn't it be awesome if one of us got a vote?
That would be so amazing. I would fly out there and be like, I accept. You didn't get enough. I don't care. I got one. I'm here.
Yeah. Well, I did see yesterday that Hakeem Jeffries' brother is an OSU professor.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, and he was sending out some pretty funny tweets about the whole process and about how he was asking his mother which one she likes better. And
on a UA podcast?
No, he was not on the UA podcast. But we need to find out if we can find a UA connection and somehow get him on the pod.
Should we ask about physics?
Yeah, go ahead and ask your question about physics.
So the Reformation actually was very interesting because now I'm obsessed with schisms. But you also have written papers about quantum physics and the theology of Christ, and I need to know of what this is. That sounds amazing.
All right. How much do you know about quantum physics?
I know the words quantum
physics.
You could probably spell it if you gave me a little bit of time.
Quantum physics is the physics of very small things. So we're in the realm of smaller than atoms.
Like neutrinos?
Neutrinos and those kinds of things.
Boom, I just had to work in.
Yes,
all right, Harvard.
So, it's the physics of very small things, which is basically a different science than the physics of very big things. All right? And one of the things, at least when I was going through college, now I've been out of college longer than I want to admit, and the field has changed. But when I was going through college, everybody was talking about string theory.
Yes, I know string theory.
String theory. The idea that the fundamental universe, makeup of the universe is very, very small strings that vibrate. So basically, the universe is music, which is kind of cool. But if that is the nature of the universe, the other thing about string theory is that it means everything is problematic. So there is some probability that I will put my hand on this table and it will go through.
Like a very small probability.
A very small probability, but it is possible. So if I sit here for 10,000 years and put my hand on this table, at some point, my hand will go through the table. Well, if you think about that, and then you think about the nature of Christ, which is evolving as he becomes fully human, and then ascends back to God, taking full humanity with him, effectively, Christ changes the nature of God on the ascension, because full humanity had not been a part of the nature of God prior to that.
My mind is melting a little bit here. That's mind-blowing.
So that's what the paper was about, was how does the nature of Christ change the nature of God?
That almost gets to my original start bench cut.
I love how you tied it all back. It's like quantum physics, string theory, my start bench cut.
Yeah, exactly. That's
you might have been an appendix to this.
That would be, if there's a young theology student out there somewhere, I think they should write a theology dissertation around the start bench cut.
The start bench cut? Hey, we could think about that.
The Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Was that really deep quantum physics paper controversial, or is that because people don't like messing with?
Not really, because the idea that the ascension changed the nature of God is very old theology. It comes not first generation Christianity, but about third generation Christianity. Bringing in quantum physics could have been controversial, except I suspect most of the people who read the paper didn't really understand the physics.
So they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense with what we know, so it's all good.
All
right, so I have one question that's really going to make me sound smarter than I am. But when you talk about your string theory and your hand might go through the table, would that fit like a multiverse where in one multiverse it did go through the table?
That's exactly right.
Oh, Marvel Comics.
The Marvel Comics are a part of
Marvel Cinematic Universe. Boom.
Yes.
I've contributed to the show, Steve.
Darren's like, check.
Check.
Darren's comic book.
Well, you also did say
interludes of the
I
day.
am a huge fan of. I'm a fan of the Black Panther particularly, but the whole Marvel cinematic universe I like.
Can you discuss why Black Panther in particular?
The thing about all superhero origin stories, Marvel or DC or any of them, is that the majority of superhero origin stories are about the redemption of the individual.
Yeah, I thought you were going to go this way. Okay.
The Black Panther origin story, is about the redemption of a society that had been internal looking and became external looking. So that's why I particularly like Black Panther, because it's beyond the individual.
Steve Bilay, leave it to me to be able to turn from quantum physics to Marvel Comics.
I figured that was coming. I figured that arc was coming. I need to see the second Black Panther movie. I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, it's cool.
Is it good?
It's really good.
Yeah, I actually was kind of confused on how they were going to do it, but they pulled it off.
They pulled it off. They really did.
For those of you listening who don't follow Marvel Comics, the actor who played Black Panther in the first movie passed away in real life. So what were they going to do? Were they going to cash grab, like CGI him? Were they going to recast him? And they kind of went a third.
They went a third direction, and they did this really interesting thing of taking a grief theme and relatively effectively working it into a superhero movie.
Right.
Which I have to admit, I thought, when I heard that's where they were going, I was like, that's not going to work. And
I thought they pulled it off.
They really did pull it off.
So, again, I'm not a theological expert or anything, but it seems like a lot of comic book arcs and themes kind of have like they're stealing from like religious type stuff. Is that, would you say you notice that, or am I just overthinking?
No, you're absolutely right. And I think it's because both religion and comic books and great literature, all of those things are stories about humanity and how human beings deal with adversity and prosperity. And so that's religion, is how do you deal with, adversity? How do you deal with prosperity? How do you set yourselves up to be the person that you need to be in the world? But that's what comic books are about, and that's what the best literature is about.
That's awesome. I'm going to take us in a little different direction.
I'm done. I got all my good questions. I'm turning that episode.
I helped you geek out well enough.
No, and
geek out. It's like I'm happy now.
And that was actually really, really cool. I wanted to ask about, so how long have you been at St. Mark's?
A year ago, September, so a little less than 18 months.
Okay. So as you've come in, what have you found is the things that are worrying your parishioners in general, and in particular, obviously not to get too parochial, but your UA parishioners in particular? What are the things that you find outside of my personal health and my kids, and
right.
What are those things that you find your parishioners caring about?
I think it falls into a couple of categories. One is we're not exactly emerging from the pandemic, but we're learning how to live in a world with COVID differently. So what does that look like, and how do we be community? How do we do that while keeping people safe? And so that whole thing of I try to not use the word post-COVID, but I don't have a better word for it.
Yeah.
What does that look like? A lot of concern about the divisions in society among my UA parishioners. We were joking about the House Speaker race, but there's an example of that. The country feels very divided. It feels like we are, that we're not coming together in the ways that we used to. So how do we be a part of that? And then St. Mark's in particular, the Episcopal Church in general, and St. Mark's in particular, has over the last 60 years or so really worked very hard at becoming a place of inclusion. And including women in ministry, including the LGBTQI+ community, working on what we call becoming the beloved community, which is anti-racist work. So all of that, how do we continue to do that? And how do we do that in the midst of a divided community where some of those things are really triggering for other groups? Yeah. And so how do we respond to people who find that stance problematic while not giving up in any way no, we are going to continue to move to equality and justice. And what part of our baptismal covenant, one of the questions that is asked is, will you strive for justice and peace among all people and respect the dignity of every human being? And those things, I think when that piece of the covenant was rewritten in the late 1970s, it felt like, oh, that's one thing, strive for justice and peace and respect the dignity. And what we're discovering is, yes, and it's also hard to respect the dignity of people who maybe don't agree with how you're striving for justice and peace. So how to hold that balance.
Do you find that tension is within your congregation, or is it like your congregation is pretty unified and you're kind of trying to mesh with the outer world?
The second. St. Mark's is pretty unified. We sponsored Pride, and there was almost no discussion about that. We have discovered that we are the land we sit on was part of Pleasant Litchfield's holdings, and we made a donation to the school to help with the memorial. And again, there was almost no discussion or dissent about that. It was just, well, yes, of course we need to do that. But becoming aware that we need to make sure that we hold space for people who aren't there yet.
As you know, we have been working on those very issues, really because that's where the community is, and we've done the survey and we've talked about that in other forums. But some of the language that kind of I've been playing around with, is this concept that we want to be a community where everybody's welcome so long as you're willing to welcome everybody.
Yes, and this is the challenge, right? How do you be inclusive of people who want to exclude? Mm-hmm. So
string theory can be the only answer there.
Yeah, it could
the
be.
Only chance for string
could
theory.
be. We need a new multiverse.
We need a multiverse where this works out.
Yeah. Well, otherwise, we're going to end up in a Braveheart movie.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think that's the challenge of any community in this environment. It's saying, how do you have limits without being dogmatic? Mm-hmm. And I think that's something, I have a lot of faith in this community that we've got, and we've got data to prove it. Literally 90 to 95% of our people in Upper Arlington, I think, would subscribe to I'm willing to welcome everybody, therefore I'm welcome here. And it's, how do you deal with that 5 to 10% that don't feel that way? And, I think the other thing we have to do is really guard against one of the other things I've taken to saying is, if you go looking for enemies, you will make them.
That's true. Well, and one of the things that we have to be aware of, and I say this in the church context all the time, is that as you grow, as you bring in new people, you by definition change your community. Mm-hmm. Because every person who comes in brings their history and their ideas and their particular interests and nerdy quirks. And if you are truly not just welcoming but inclusive and include people into your community, they will change your community.
This goes right back to your thesis paper.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, that's
all string theory.
It's all string theory and Jesus. That's what it is.
So
sounds like a good album.
There we go.
I think that was the alternate title for Godspell. So you're relatively new to UA. What's the biggest thing that surprised you?
Growing up in Westerville, UA had a reputation of if you weren't from there, you would never be from there. And so I have been really surprised at how how willing the UA community is to not just welcome but include new people. I'm not sure that was true when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, but it's certainly true now.
It's all because of Steve.
Could be.
No.
In the 3 years he's been here, he just changed everything.
No.
That was facetious, Steve. I was not actually giving you credit.
Not giving you credit for anything.
No, that's not
No, because I've been here I've lived here for, it's like I have to think how old my youngest is because we moved when he was 6 months old. I've been here for 16 and a half years now. And so it wasn't because I was here. It's because you.
Oh, in the last 2 years.
It's in the last 2 years.
I only beat you by a year, so
There
everything
we go,
good
yeah.
I can take credit
There
for.
you go.
I
It's
guess.
all we'll give you the credit.
Yes.
It's all Schulman.
This is the Steve Darren schism, by the way. Who was responsible?
Who's responsible?
I actually
for
paid you a compliment on the podcast.
I know.
That might be a
makes
first.
me uncomfortable. I'm not used to it.
Darren's blushing.
His equilibrium is off.
Yeah,
Something's
I've
not right
completely
for us.
thrown him off.
String theory. Oh, in one universe, Steve says something nice to me. This is it.
I've ruined your day. I'm sorry.
No, I've string theory. The whole world's going to collapse. What's his name? The big villain from your Marvel movies.
Thanos?
Yeah, Thanos is now going to
is
come and
gonna
rain
come
down.
Yeah.
And half the people are going to die. Because I complimented you on the podcast again. We're
all
going to
ties
have
together.
that. We're going to have a schism between the Anglican and the American Episcopal
Yeah,
churches.
there we go.
It's going to be.
I hope we didn't actually cause that. Like, I know.
We put it out
I
in the
think it would
universe.
take a whole lot more than a
Because
podcast.
when I was in school, we learned about all these things, and always like they tried to figure out where it kind of started. It was
Yeah.
always kind of something kind of small.
Yeah,
at the time.
I mean, the division between the Eastern and the Western Church really started with what day do we celebrate Easter?
Yeah, you would think that, like, so it could be Steve and I 100 years from now, like, well, there was this podcast.
I don't know.
I don't even know what a podcast is because
Hey,
we don't do those
We don't do
anymore.
those anymore. But
William was really mean to Megan, and they talked about it on that podcast, and it
Yeah,
just
there
blew
you
up. So, as you know, we tend to finish out. Not tend to. We do finish out every podcast.
It's a rule.
It is a rule. Well, this is not one where we are going to string theory fall through the multiverse.
Okay.
And not ask you our final two questions, which are, what do you love about UA and what would you change?
Okay. What I love about UA is one of the things I've already mentioned is both the direction that the community is moving in and where it's already gotten in terms of welcoming and inclusion and creating space for people to find their home here. And it's not something that happens everywhere. It's not something every community values. It's not something every community succeeds at. Change, it's two things, sidewalks and streetlights. And the reason is I visit my parishioners, in their homes. And so I'm the one driving along the street at 10 miles an hour especially now when it gets dark early, looking at the houses trying to find the house number. And then, people are jogging at me because there are no sidewalks. One of these days, this is going to lead to me getting to know the UA police a whole lot better than I want to, either because I look like I'm casing houses or I'm going to hit somebody.
I guess I hope the first.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want you to get pulled over, but that's a better way. Yeah.
Better way. So sidewalks and streetlights.
I thought you were referencing our producer Brian's sidewalk.
Well,
he's gamely doing the
know.
producer with one arm today.
Yeah.
So for our listening audience, producer Brian had a little incident before the holidays, before the snow, where Brian is kind of a fit guy. He keeps himself in pretty good shape and runs, and sometimes he trips, and tripped and messed up his shoulder pretty darn good.
It's like his arm is tied down to his body now, post surgery.
So he's got one. He's got one of the big kind of puffy sling things. Where'd the like squeeze ball thing go?
I took it off.
Oh, he had the squeeze ball thing, which I thought looked really cool, but it's the only thing that looks cool about it. But it was. My guess is he got. Although you have dogs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it was like the most. I'm sure the dog was like all over it, wanting all over all the time. What's that ball? What's that ball? So anyway, Brian is recouping gamely in here. He had been out of the office until I sent him a message saying Vicki was coming in, and are you okay to do this? Because if you're not, we can have Jackie sub for you.
Yeah, once we mentioned the Jackie sub, even though I don't think she knows how to run the system.
Oh, she would have figured it out.
He healed up quickly.
He very quickly figured out his thing.
That you were worried that somebody might take your gig?
Brian is somewhat gig replacement proof because he knows how to use the proprietary software, but Steve and I are always at risk of being replaced on our own show by Jackie.
Yeah. So anyway, how did we end up on Brian instead?
She's talking about
sidewalks and lights.
Her very serious, thoughtful answers to us. And
it was a good answer. I just took it in a bad place.
See, now the universe has righted itself.
There we go.
Now I'm making fun of Darren. It's funny. Sidewalks are strangely sidewalks in on-street parking are that thing that I did not expect to be super, super controversial. But holy cow.
Yeah, you got the trash fixed. Now you get to deal with sidewalks and parking.
Yeah, I can't claim credit for the trash. That was my predecessor. But sidewalks and parking. People get pretty fired up about sidewalks. People somehow think that, a sidewalk is going to lead to, I don't know, somebody walking up to the house and stealing a TV and carrying it out on their back, which is not something I've ever heard. And now we can actually use the Pastor Vicki example and say, see, it's when you don't have sidewalks and people have to drive really slow that they're like, hey, I could become a thief and start casing out homes.
There you go.
Rather than if I had really good streetlights and sidewalks, it would be much safer. Can we use that? Do you think
we can use it?
I'm not sure how much weight it'll carry, but go for it.
But I will say this, just so people know, there is a process if you are in a neighborhood and you want sidewalks, which you and your neighbors can petition.
Yep.
And man, I'm going to mess this up, but isn't it like we pay half and they pay half through an assessment? So people, you can't do it on behalf of all the places you're driving, but if you are in a neighborhood and you don't want to run around in the streets, you can petition for sidewalks.
Yes, because as we've had on one of our earlier podcast episodes, we had a whole discussion about right-of-ways and sidewalks, and sidewalks are actually owned by the homeowner and are the responsibility of the homeowner, but they sit within the city right-of-way, and so there's a whole...
It's a thing.
It's a thing. It's a whole really, really boring thing that we tried to make fun once, and I don't know that we ever made it fun, and we're not going to do it right now.
But I don't know how it works with streetlights. I'll leave that to you, Steve.
Streetlights, I don't know. That would be maybe we'll have Jackie on to talk about streetlights because Jackie could talk about streetlights.
So you were my favorite guest until you opened the door to Jackie coming back on.
I'm sorry.
What
can I say?
I don't know what I can do about this.
Well, Vicki, thank you for being here. Thank you for doing what you do for our residents and for our community. Having the faith community is something that sometimes I just honestly think we take for granted. And the work that you do to minister to those in our community, it's not just about their spiritual needs. I also know it's about helping people with whatever they need. And so I appreciate the work that you and all of your colleagues in the faith community do. Thanks for being a fan of the podcast. So
thanks for bearing with our questions today.
This
I'm sure
fun.
We violated some sort of rule or something.
This is another theme.
It's all about grace, man. All about grace.
This is another theme on the podcast where it's the city attorney gets on. It's like, did we just do something that was illegal?
Yeah. Or it's a theological rule with these questions.
Darren, I remember it was I think it was the first one where we were talking about sidewalks and snow removal, and Darren's like giving advice. I'm like, that's not really legal advice for all of our listeners. So here we go with Darren. Again, starting off year 2 the same way we started off year 1. So
vicious cycle.
Sounds good. And thank you for being our first guest in year 1 or year 2. So
cool. That's really special. I'm going to put a note on my wall.
I think you should put that when you talk to your board next year and you talk to the bishop. I think you should put that on high on your list of
what did you accomplish this year?
It
was kind of a slow year, but I was on the podcast.
I was on the podcast. Hey, man.
What did you do to expand the ministry? And there you go.
There you go. Well, that was Fred. I'll end with this. That was Fred Rogers. He was a Presbyterian pastor. And he was actually commissioned by the Presbyterian Church to spread the gospel through television.
Wait, for real?
For real. So.
And we just learned like so much today. I mean, we went from like science and physics to like.
I feel way smarter than I did.
And we should have known this because we've been kind of like not
morning.
Copyright protection stealing his thing for like 2 years now. We didn't even know that.
But it was, again, it was kind of back to the Joliet Jake in the back of the church. It's just the divine inspiration coming down on us. And now we just need James Brown and a bunch of
there you go.
People flipping around in front of us.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming
on. You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.